Hey everybody, it's Grandmaster Ben Finegold again with another video in our series of forgotten players. Today's subject is Emmanuel Schiffers. Schiffers played in the great Hastings 1895 tournament, won by Pillsbury, with all the leading players in the world, maybe almost all of them, if not all of them, and he tied for 6th place. And he was considered the second best player in Russia after Mikhail Chigorin. In fact, Mikhail Chigorin was his student, and when he first taught him and they worked together, he actually spotted Chigorin a night. A few years later, Chigorin was the better player. So Chigorin's a famous player, Schiffers not so much, but Schiffers not only played matches with Chigorin, losing one and winning one, he also played a match with Steinitz after Steinitz was world champion in 1896. Steinitz won 6.5, 4.5. So obviously Schiffers was quite a good player, playing a close match with the former world champion. Emmanuel Schiffers was born in St. Petersburg, and he was born in 1850 and died in 1904. And he has a lot of really nice games, but I'll actually show you his most famous game against Max Harmonist. In fact, Max Harmonist is another player we could look at in this series. This was played in 1887 in Frankfurt, and Chernev called it Schiffers Immortal. So pretty good game. I enjoyed the game. They played sort of a modern version of this line. In fact, we saw this variation in the famous game between Steinitz and von Bardeleben from Hastings 1895. And in that game, Steinitz played knight c3, which is the old move. And there's a lot of analysis on knight c3. Von Bardeleben didn't play the most testing line. Steinitz won one of the most brilliant games ever. Here, Schiffers played the move that you would see today in Grandmaster play, bishop to d2. And Harmonist played the most accurate way. He traded and played d5, takes, queen b3. Now, there are games in Grandmaster play over the last 10, 20, 30 years where sort of a non-game, where black plays knight a5, forking the queen and bishop, check, knight c6, queen b3, and they repeat and they draw. That's happened several times. Instead, black played another move that is very common, especially nowadays when the player with the black pieces is trying to win the game and doesn't want to draw, knight to e7. Okay. And this is just a typical isolated pawn position. White has all of his pieces out. White has the e5 square for his knight. And after castling, white has a lead in development. White has 3 minor pieces out to 2. White's castled and black hasn't. And white's queen is pretty reasonably placed on b3. But white has an isolated pawn, and the engines would probably say it's about equal. Okay, and very modern looking game actually. Castles, rook e1, very reasonable. c6, this looks like the way 2 strong game masters would play today. Okay, now a4 is a bit unusual, but the idea is clear. He's stopping black from playing b5, and maybe white's going to play a5 later and take the b6 square. Queen c7. Queen c7, I think, by the engines is considered a mistake now. Probably be safer to play h6, but okay, seeing what white did this game ahead of time would be virtually impossible. Rook c1 with the rook on c1 and the queen on c7. That's going to be good for white. If it was white's turn to move here, bishop takes d5 is a serious threat because this is pinned. So he has to move his knight f4, knight g5. And obviously black doesn't want to move his knight because that opens up the queen and bishop on the diagonal to f7. So queen c7 is a pretty bad mistake. After rook c1, black's already in trouble here. Black moved his queen out to a bad square instead of getting his other pieces out. Okay, knight g5, threatening f7, knight g6. Okay, now the next move is not engine approved. It's not a terrible move, but it's obviously the most exciting move, and it leads us to the game that we have. And a lot of times, the most brilliant games will start with a move that's not engine recommended, and a lot of complications happen, and somebody's not up to the task, because chess is a tough game. And this is a very exciting move, and one that you wouldn't expect in a game between two such strong players. I guess Schiffers didn't see a great way to continue his attack, so he played a really exciting move, which definitely continues the attack. Rook to e8. What an amazing move. So it pins the rook on f8. If it's white's move, white's going to take on f7. So black has to take the rook. We take with check. King f8 looks really bad because I have lots of good moves. Knight takes h7 check, forcing the king to e7. Bishop takes rook is probably good. That's not right. He played king h8. Okay, and after bishop takes e8, black made his second mistake of the game. It's a mistake that a lot of us would make. I think this mistake would happen. I think a lot of grandmasters would probably play this mistake. Black should play h6, and that way if knight f7, his king has the h7 square, since knight f7 is a huge threat here. And instead of playing h6, Harmonist decided to take the material, which didn't work out for him. But the reason it didn't work out is very difficult to see now. So he took the material. After h6, the engine says white has a slight advantage. Not winning, but good for white. Instead, he played knight e2 check and took the rook on c1, which I think a lot of us would do. Knight f7 check, the king has to go to g8. Double check, you can't go to h8 because queen g8 is mate, so you have to go to f8. And you can't do anything else. The king is actually in check by 2 pieces. When it's double check, you have to move your king. That's one of the things that happens in chess. Queen g8 check, you have to play king e7. Okay. And in this position, Schiffers played bishop takes g6. And the idea is, if I take on g7 check, and you play something like king d8 defending your queen, while the queen's attacked, the bishop's attacked, the bishop on e8 isn't really helping white attack. It's sort of getting in the way. So by taking the knight, white takes another piece, and you can see black's pieces aren't really good for defending his king. His king's just wide open, and all of white's pieces are near it. He takes the bishop, takes check. He has to move his king to defend his queen, and he can't play king d6 because there might be some mate I don't see, but after knight c4 check or knight e4 check, you can't defend your queen. Okay, there might be a better move, but this attacks the king, the queen's attacked. That's the end of the analysis. You have to move your king away from your queen. You can't do that. Okay, so he has to play king d8. Okay, queen f8 check. You have to play king d7. So basically, black didn't have a lot of choice since he took that rook on c1. And probably Harmonist was thinking, white has a perpetual check, queen f7, queen f8. A draw's okay, and I'm up a rook, so if he goes crazy, I could even win. Okay, and Morphy would be proud because Schiffers got his last piece into the attack. He hasn't used his knight on d2 at all, and he played knight e4. And probably when Harmonist played knight e2 check, knight takes rook on c1, he probably missed that white, who's down a rook for basically nothing, just makes an attacking move that's not check and brings another piece into the attack, and black is helpless. White's threatening knight c5 mate and wins the game. Now, b6 is probably the best move, and the engine still says white wins, but it's not as easy. And I think the best move after b6 is the paradoxical, very similar to knight e4, knight to g4. Okay, now we're threatening this knight to f6 mate. Also, knight e5 check is, well, it's not mate, the king can go to e6. But this knight's f6 check, this knight's e5 check are both winning because there's a mating attack. And I think when the engines look at it long enough, they're like, all right, black's king's not going to survive. But that would have been more interesting because it's not clear that Schiffers would have found knight g4, or maybe there's even more ways to win. But b6 is the best defense. And a lot of times when you're getting attacked and attacked and attacked, it's very difficult to play the best defense every move. So sometimes unsound attacks work in chess. This is not an unsound attack. So it really worked because Harmonist played the mistake queen d8, which was easy to beat. b6 would have been a better defense. Still should be losing, but it would have been tougher. This move is easily beaten. It only takes 2 moves. So Harmonist should have thought longer and tried to defend more accurately. He was so worried about knight c5 check, since that's checkmate, he gave his king a square on c7. And maybe he was, had tunnel vision. He was like, knight c5 check, I got to do something about that. Oh, okay, good, I did something about it. Well, he undefended the d6 square, which his queen on c7 was defending. And that's very important because after queen d6 check, the only legal move is king e8, which obviously I approve of, setting up for the next game. And knight f6 check, there's only one legal move and you don't want to make it. In fact, Harmonist didn't want to make it, so he did not. He resigned and the game ended here. If queen takes knight, queen takes queen, and white's way ahead in material, still with a mating attack. And no reason to make a move here. We're already set up for the next game. Just reset the board. So a brilliant attacking game from Schiffers. Harmonist made a couple of mistakes, but obviously, if you lose at chess, you make a mistake or two. And it's unfortunate for Schiffers because he was from Russia and because Chigorin was the most famous player from Russia for many years, he didn't really get the accolades, and that's why he's a forgotten player. But winning a match against Chigorin, tied for 6th in Hastings 1895, probably the strongest tournament ever before 1900, and losing a match to former world champion Stein at 6.5, 4.5, he was a top player. So good going, Emmanuel Schiffers, a great win, a great forgotten player. I hope you enjoy this series. This is Grandmaster Ben Finegold. Please like and subscribe. Follow my YouTube page also, and follow the Twitch pages for me and Karen. I'll see you next time. Bye.